One of the headlines that popped up yesterday, it was so exciting, was that the NFL draft is coming to the nation's capital in 2027. Who would have thought this was a possibility just a few years ago? So let's bring in the great John Keim to talk about it. He is the Commanders insider for ESPN. John, first of all, always great to hear from you. Thank you so much for waking up with us. And what was your initial reaction? Because I thought this was a possibility down the line. I didn't expect this announcement so soon.
Yeah, first of all, who could have seen the Belichick situation going awry like that?
Oh, my God.
That's really hard to believe. Anyways, as far as this goes, I wouldn't say I was surprised by this because, you heard a little bit of talk about it, and obviously with the stadium agreement, I don't think it was necessarily just because of that. I think, it sounds like this is something that has been discussed for a while because you can't just do this, a week after you announce the stadium deal to go back to RFK or agreement on the deal, and just announce this. So this clearly had been something they had been working on. So I don't, again, I think it's a natural byproduct of a lot of the changes here over the last, let's say since July 2023 with Josh Harris taking over for Dan Snyder, that this city is kind of going to get some things from the NFL, and this is one of them. So, but I was not surprised by this, and not really by the timing either, because it was the next available time or slot to fill, I guess, for the draft. So, in a lot of ways, it certainly makes sense.
Yeah, how bright is the future for the Commanders right now? Because it feels like one of those stocks where it just keeps climbing. Like we've already seen the dip where we saw the last few years for the Commanders where the ownership people didn't like. They didn't know who their quarterback was going to be. But now you have a franchise quarterback. You're getting the NFL draft in your city. Should fans be excited about the next few years?
Yes, and dip is a polite way to describe it. Yeah, that was quite a dip. It was kind of like about the size of the Grand Canyon. So yeah, I think it's amazing how different it is again compared to 2 years ago. When you look at like the transformation that's taking place, not just they were 12-5. You have Jaden Daniels, right? Like one of the most exciting young players in the NFL. But it goes beyond that. Just the money that they're putting into the infrastructure of the practice facility, which, if you are listing as a real estate thing, it would have been listed as a charming residence, right? It's small, but they're putting a lot of money in there to make it better. They're putting the crown molding in there to make it a much nicer place inside. Something that hadn't really been done before. So little things like that, I think, are also the details are part of the transformation. Under Dan Snyder, there are a lot of times I know coaches would come here. The Shanahans came here and they thought this guy's going to spend because look at the money he spends on players, and they get here and they realize that's not taking place in the infrastructure. And so it's the big things that are visible, the success on the field. You have the right coach in Dan Quinn, a general manager that a lot of people clearly respect in Adam Peters. So that part is transformed, but then it's also the infrastructure, I think, just makes it a better situation top to bottom. And so I think for long-term success, I think that's the way you have to approach things. So what they do this year, who knows? But over the next 5, 6, 7, 10 years, they're going to probably be better more often than not.
We're talking with John Keim. He is the Commanders insider for ESPN. John, you touched on it a little bit, talking about how, there was a dip for this franchise, which, again, is putting it lightly. But can you sort of give us some perspective? And, we both covered this team for a long time, but
right.
This would have been the fact that we're talking about a stadium at the RFK site and the fact the NFL has said we're coming to the nation's capital. This would have been unfathomable just 3 years ago.
Correct. Yeah. Mayor Bowser, I talked to her in December, and at that point she basically said, like, this wasn't going to happen. She didn't say it like this, but the clear implication was it was never going to happen with Dan Snyder in charge. And so that people didn't want to be in business with him at that time with all the investigations going on, the approach they took. It wasn't until Bruce Allen was out that some people here had started finally, when he left, they started finally meeting with the council members because you have to convince them that this is a good deal, but that wasn't happening before. So there are a lot of things. And again, just Dan Snyder himself was a major hindrance in all sorts of deals. So it just, that's the biggest thing. And again, it's the most visible thing, but I also think it's just, there were good people in this organization prior, but you had enough that were, I think, not quite what you'd want to run your franchise. And, his hiring practices weren't very consistent or good. And the result is what we saw. And, it's funny because I tell people always say it's like a night and day difference. I'm like, that doesn't even describe the difference. So it's my way of saying it's almost like the difference between the sun and the moon. That's how far apart the organizations are. It's like, it really feels like I'm covering a new organization. Very much so. Definitely feels like that.
Yeah, so set the stage for us because, just an outsider looking in, this does look like it's going to be one of the more iconic locations of the NFL draft because it's going to be the National Mall, right? Like the source of all of these, historic scenes. So just how cool is it going to be?
I'm sure, listen, I'm sure it'll be, if you've seen like the 4th of July stuff at the Capitol, like they can put on a production. So there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of iconic sites that you can feature when you're down there, and just the shots of it, right? And it's funny because I'll extend that to the stadium. And one reason why when you talk to people here about why they want to be back down in the city, obviously the RFK site means something to them. But what they also will talk about is the vision. And the vision is like, hey, picture this, it's a Monday night game, and you have the crowd pans to the monument, the White House, the Capitol, and then you're right at the stadium. And it's all right in that range, right? And I think you get the same thing with the draft. Those are sites that it's hard to match that, for any other city, right? So I think that will be kind of cool and very good for the city for sure.
John, how much does Roger Goodell have to do with the stadium and also the draft coming to D.C.? Because it feels like when you listen to him, you get the real sense, and even he's sort of said this, he has a real, I feel like, initiative to make football relevant in the nation's capital. Again, it's good for the league, and I think he kind of has a soft spot for the history here.
Well, he definitely does. He used to go to games at RFK, so he definitely understands what it means to this area and what it means to be back in the city and to have a good franchise here again. A competitive, not just, there were years where they were competitive or had, there were, fringe playoff teams under Dan Snyder. It wasn't like they were always 4-12 or 4-13, but we all know how the fan base reacted to it, right? You were losing customers even as you were flirting with 500 and flirting with a playoff spot. Your people were dropping off because they were tired of a lot of things. And so I think the NFL knows how important it is to have a strong product here, and because the history of that franchise and what it means. And I think the other, how involved is he? Well, clearly there was an effort by the league and the team. They did a lot of lobbying up on Capitol Hill to get a provision in that continuing resolution bill back in December that would transfer the land to D.C. because without that, this isn't happening. So the league and the team was doing that. Now it's up to, in terms of the draft, but clearly the league has a big say in that. So that's definitely part of it. Now with the from here forward, it's really on the team to convince the team and the mayor and her staff to convince the council members that this is a good deal. So I don't know that Goodell would be involved in that. I'm not sure that would be a great idea. I don't think you need to bring in muscle. I think you need to play ball with them, right? And so I think that would be better from a local perspective. But I think to this point, clearly the league wants a strong product here. And so, yeah, there you go.
All right, so a couple minutes left here. I understand it's May 5th. It's probably early to be talking about the season, but the Commanders made such a big jump from a team that was not really super relevant to a team that now is kind of in the spotlight. So now going into this next season, what are the expectations for this team? Because obviously they still play in the division with the Philadelphia Eagles,
Right.
What's the expectation for the team this year?
17-0. What do you think? Yeah, you know how fans are. No, I think the expectations is to. It's funny because when I hear from fans, I don't think they have unrealistic expectations about like, oh, now the next step is you got to get to the Super Bowl this year. It's not a Super Bowl or bust type year. They're not at that point yet, right? However, I think what you want to see with the expectations is to continue like string together a back-to-back playoff season. To be the first time since 91, 92. Like do that. Then I think fans will know like, okay, now it wasn't just a one-year blip. I mean, I think we can sit here and talk about how different it is, and it is, and how much better it is, and Jaden Daniels, et cetera. But if you somehow slip to 7-10, well, that's, then people say, oh, okay, same stuff. But I think if you can build on the success, which is get to the playoffs again, right? That would be the start, because if with Jaden in the playoffs, I think any team is going to be scared to play them, and just continue to show that you're building something that is sustainable long term, and that to me would be the goal. And it's hard. Like you look at the schedule this year, on paper, it's tougher. Now it's tougher for every team in the NFC East, but it's tougher. So. You win 12 games last year, some of those in the fourth quarter, right? And you have all that success. Can you win double-digit games against this schedule? Like that, if you do that, to me, that's a good year. And again, that would put you in the playoffs in back-to-back years for the first time in more than 30 years.
He is the Commanders insider for ESPN, also host of the John Keim Report podcast. It is the great John Keim. John, we really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Always enjoy coming on. Thank you.
You bet.